We were lucky to have a poster from her in our AIGA poster show this summer, which was about her poster was about surfing, so it was one of my faves. In addition to that, she also founded a nonprofit called More Women Surf, and the goal of that organization is to make the sport more accessible. So she's doing a lot of awesome stuff in the space, and we're really happy to see her here tonight. And we also have Ryan McDermott. He's here representing Black Point Surf Shop, which he runs with his brother Andy. In addition to supplying all the stuff that we need, like the wetsuits and leashes and fins and everything else, they also design, shape, and finish some pretty amazing surfboards. And Ryan is particularly, he's involved in the glassing and finishing part. So we're really happy to have both of them here tonight to talk about this subject. And I'm gonna pass it over to them in a second. I just want to say that we'll have a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions for either of the speakers, feel free to drop those in the chat during the talk, and we'll try to circle back to those in the Q&A. So yeah, I'm gonna say that's it for me, and I'm gonna pass it over to Pam to kick things off.
Hi, everyone. Okay, I'm gonna start my presentation just to kind of start talking a little bit. Oh, there you go. There is. Awesome. Okay, I will just put this, share. And okay, can everyone see my screen? Hoping yes. So my name is Pam Chévez. I'm a multidisciplinary designer and co-founder of More Women Surf. Like Stuart mentioned before, I was born and raised in Mexico City. I graduated college on a major in illustration, and then I moved into animation and just general branding design. I moved to Portland like around 6 years ago, which honestly seems not that long for me, but it's been 6 years. And yeah, I learned to surf in Maine, which is kind of surprising coming from Mexico, where the water is warmer and you don't have to wear a wetsuit all the time. So, but yeah, I learned in Maine. It was quite a challenge, but I ended up loving it. What I'm going to talk about today is mostly a lot of the trends out there, especially when it comes to surf branding, and more specific to groups of surfing. Most of the things I've seen and that work even just with our group is things that are simple, that are candid, bare, and by that I mean, you know, bare to the bone. You can see what's going on, pretty authentic. I'm gonna show you some examples. We have the Women's Surf Festival, Girls Swirl, which is another nonprofit which focuses more in skateboarding in general and brings also accessibility to some communities, especially underserved communities. We have Emila Skate, a group of Bolivian girls skating and teaching and bringing more access to the sport as well, but also while being proud of themselves and their roots as Indigenous women. We have the Queer Surf Club. Mexilac Fest is just a festival down in Mexico, but the reason why I'm showing you this is because there's like a general feeling, similarities to it. Everything is pretty hand-drawn, pretty dynamic. There's a lot of, you know, just simplicity to it, a lot of that retro feeling in some aspects. I think when we talk about branding, it's important to know who we want to be part of these groups, who we want to call attention for, who is this for, right? So if we take a look at Queer Surf Club, for example, like it's just a beautiful logo design that includes a sunset, a wave, which could be literally as basic as all the images we see with the little sun in the top and the waves
Hey,
down.
Pam, I'm sorry to jump in, but I think for some reason, are you showing pages beyond the first page already?
Yeah.
Oh, for some reason, we're not seeing, we're just seeing still the front page.
Oh, weird. Can you see? Let me see.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yep.
I guess I'm not gonna do it like as full presentation, so I'm just gonna run it.
Perfect.
Leave it
Yeah.
up on interface.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what I was talking about, in case you didn't get the full visualization. So first things first, who are you talking about? Who you want to focus on? A lot of these brands really like, like you can see what they're going for. If we grab this element over here, you know that there's this really traditional hat from Bolivia just made out on a skateboard. It's something that we just have to keep in mind when we're doing branding. I think like branding sometimes comes off as people not liking to be too commercial, and in a way of like, that's gonna take away from me being human. They don't see branding as something that can help. Sometimes that I've heard from people, like, I don't want to be a brand, and it's like, it's not a brand, it's mostly you, but in a visual way, which is the way I like to see branding. It's how you put yourself out there as an image. It's more than just what we think about capitalism and all those things, right? It's you in a graphic. So why is it important? It's important because I'm gonna give an example just to talk about it. When people start reaching out for lessons with us, then the reason why they choose us, aside from other local communities to that, or groups that were doing lessons, one of the reasons why was we loved the branding. We loved to see the website and what was happening there, and how that you communicate this like kindness and welcoming image in your website. Like, that's what made us go through it, right? So branding matters, and branding is not only your visuals. Branding, it's also the personality, it's also the people that you are working with, and how you're gonna voice those things to the community and to people. So yeah, I think like one of the things that has helped us a lot is have a perfect team of collaborators that can relate themselves with other parts of the community. Because in the end, if we are a group of women that's trying to be I forgot my English. Is that time of the day? If we're trying to be inclusive, right? We gotta have that inclusivity as well in a team, and that's what like helps a lot more to create that branding. I'm gonna show a little bit of what I do in general. This is a little bit of my work. I'm mostly a illustrator. Like I said, I graduated in a major in illustration. So a lot of my work, it's influenced by that perspective, or that way of seeing things. I love doing art on boards. That's one of the things I started doing when I moved to Maine, especially just out of fun. I would grab boards out of Mosen, this shop. I will grab all of the broken boards. The guys would leave aside and just start painting. And there was someone at the time who would reshape those boards. I start painting. Like, it's not my full-time thing to do, but like if there's a need for a painting in a surfboard, like I love fully doing that. And it has a lot to do with who is the person writing the board and what they want and what they need. This project, for example, was literally Andy called me one day and he was like, we need an octopus in a board and it needs to be ready ASAP. So there's not much time to do it. So I just show up, I grab paint, and as you can see, it was literally with my fingers that I painted this board. It was a fun project and it didn't last more than 2 hours to do. Then this is my favorite. This board took me a lot of time. Actually, Andy kicked me out of the shop at some point. He was like, are you gonna serve or what? This is taking you so long. It's taking you forever, but it has been one of the things that I've been appreciating the most. Like, I think board design, it's so connected with who you are, right? Like, if you are putting your board out there, it speaks for you. It says, this is me, this is the important things for me. For me is home, and you can see a lot of my roots back in Mexico and what I do for work. There's always a symbolism behind each thing I do. In this case, each little tile meant something, from the ocean till the community I have, from life, bringing my friends. That person there, it's one of my friends, really good friends, that I asked her to draw a tile on it, and it just adds up to that personality, making it unique. I'm a brand designer, like I said. I mostly focus on what the client needs, who they are. This example over here, that's for Indigo Alliance and their sister program, which is Black Seed Studios, where their concept is to like keep feeding the community, the BIPOC community, as artists, and like make them grow, help them grow. So it's a symbol of that representation, that growth representation. We have jewelry on the blue cards, and then we have a band logo below here. It's everything has been curated and has been like thought on the client, on their needs, on who they want to talk to. It's a process of collaboration and listening to my client, and not as a client, but as a human, and being like, I just really love this kind of style, and like the kind of people I want to work with, or I am trying to reach, is this or this. For example, the band logo was for these folks that are doing a lot of, big band concerts outside, with like just sometimes improvising, but they really dig like the old times. So it's like a mix of bringing the old times with Maine and give a mix of it. I don't know if I'm a little bit over the place, but my point here is branding can get you further on the things you want, and can cover so much more of that public out there. If you do it right, if you are authentic with it. I think in the surf scene is mostly, or it has been showing that there's like a nostalgia for the 90s, a little bit of like even more retro things, like the 60s, like it still remains like pretty strong, and it just has like a little hit of modern to it. So yeah, I'm really bad at this. Another thing is surfing and graphic design. What I consider really important for graphic design is education. I think it's something that probably is not out there as much. We don't realize the power that graphics have sometimes. It's actually a barrier, a language barrier. There's a language barrier, and graphics really help to understand more what's going on, especially if you don't speak the language of the place you are at, or if you're new to something, or if you have struggles with words in general. graphic design is there to like provide that information in a clearer way, where video exists, but sometimes can be hard to read, especially if it's not taken the right way. When graphic design is just like static, and it just adds up to that pictography that we have had from ancient times. So like, I'm just gonna show you a little example here. I grabbed this from Barefoot. They're doing a really good work about educating folks. It's not as accessible. It can be pricey, but my point with this one is I've heard so many people or so many folks asking, where do I catch the wave, right? Where is the right point? And for me, it has been hard to explain right in the water, because I can be like, hey, just look at it, like there, that's the point, like 3/4 of it, like that's where you need to get it. But like there's so much going in their heads at that time of learning that probably they're even not aware or fully aware at the moment. So breaking those things into graphics in a simple way can be more memorable, and then bringing it to practice, it's helpful, right? Like you're not gonna stick just with what you see in the graphics, but you're gonna practice it. So to get a better education, to have better surf etiquette, it's not only get in the water and see how it goes, it's also how we facilitate that information, how we make it clear for people to really understand what we're saying. I was telling this to Ryan a couple hours ago, like we have that sign that I think Black Point put out there at Higgins about surf etiquette. And I was like, is it readable though? Like, can people read it? Why people don't read it? Is it because it has a bad design? No. And we got to the point where it's like, there's just too many other signs around it, right? So it's not just about the graphic design you have on it. It's also about how the space is designed and how much you have around. Design is involved in every single area of our lives, I think, like in everything we do. More than just graphic design, we're talking about the design of a system, the design of a communication of our community, how we express things, the design of, hierarchy is important, color is important. Those are things that we sometimes take for granted, I think. Even sometimes respecting our own brands can be hard for some people. If we don't keep consistency, then people don't know who we're talking about or who's the one talking or speaking. It's literally kind of like your personality and your seal. One of the things that I really like about Maine in this whole thing of designing is the way I see it. And I'm pretty much a new surfer, because it's been just like 4 years. I would say 5, but like really it's been 4 years of me surfing. But what I like about it is there's room, because it's a growing scene. It's not as big as it is in California. There were definitely like a lot of surfers here before, but Maine is growing. People's getting more in the water. So we're still at that phase, where we like are able to kind of like do it right and be welcoming, create a space that allows us to really do education in the way that it should be. Allow space for others to be friendly and for others to just feel welcome. I think like that's one of the things that I really admire about the community in Maine. I think like it's pretty open in general. They're really helpful. There's like this sense of helping each other out. It can be harsh, obviously, right? Like we are in the water as we see it growing, as we see it, the lineup growing. Obviously, we get a little bit like, this didn't used to be like that. But at the same time, is the more people we have involved in something, and this is something I came to realization with a friend, and she put it in the right words for me. It was the more people we involve into something, the more people we introduce to something that we welcome them, the more people we're gonna have to care for it, right? So if we have more people in the water, we introduce them, if we help them to be there, if we are helpful, then they're gonna start caring also for the place where they do surfing, right? Which is the ocean. So yeah, it might seem like a lot sometimes, it might be overwhelming, but if we do things the right way, then we're gonna have more people interested in taking care of that place that we call playground. So I think design does a really strong job into this. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm a little bit all over the place. It's my brain, but yeah, I think like that's pretty much all I have to say in 15 minutes.
Okay, so yeah, I sort of introed Ryan earlier, and I'm just going to let him jump in and talk about his experience with owning the shop and the design side of things.
Let me stop the share. There you go.
Hello, can you guys hear me? Good. Cool. Yeah, I'm Ryan McDermott, born or raised in Freeport, Maine, and have been surfing for about 20 years now. Been building surfboards for 18, and we've had our retail store in Scarborough for the last decade. And yeah, like I said, grew up in Freeport. Had an older brother who we was always sibling rivalry and always pushing each other to do different things and to do them better than the other one. And I moved to Nantucket to live with my high school roommate and was there during the summer, and my brother came and visited, and that was where we first saw surfing. We didn't even know we could surf in Maine until we left. And by the end of that summer, we both bought bad surfboards, but we had surfboards and we started surfing as much as we could. And within that next year, we needed new equipment because, like I said, it was junk and we couldn't afford it because we were broke high school kids. So we bought materials and started building surfboards. And our first, I think we both kept our first boards, but our second boards we sold. And like the first board I ever sold to somebody, I did full life-size Pitbull. His dog Boudreaux was on the bottom of the board, and sold it to him. My brother did a similar thing where somebody wanted like a pretty simple graphic on the bottom of the board, and so we did it. And before we knew it, we were making boards for other friends and then friends of friends and then people we didn't even know. And we did that for about 6 years, just like through trial and error. And then we were on vacation in Southern California, and I'm gonna share my screen. See if this goes. Can you guys see that? View slideshow. Hope you can see that. So yeah, that's me on the, Ryan, and my brother's Andy. And then when we were in California, we met these two guys, and Terry was a professional surfer up until the late 80s. Brad was and still like one of the biggest surfboard builders in the country. And we hit it off with the two guys, and they said that they'd teach us if we moved there. So we came back and we packed up our stuff and we moved out to San Clemente, California. And it's been like a second West Coast home ever since. And we lived there for a full year and worked for them in a surfboard factory and really got the ropes. I mean, Terry at this point, I think, has done like 50 or 80,000 surfboards. And like when I was working at Brad's factory, we were doing almost 100 boards a week. So it was like putting your hands on a lot of boards and seeing a lot of equipment being produced. And it was a pretty amazing opportunity. when we got back, we decided to make a full effort at it and start building boards full time. And did that for a couple of years. And then we started Black Point Surf Shop. And we're on Black Point Road in Scarborough. It's really been, we started as just a place. We had too many people coming out to our house, and we just needed a place to meet customers and have like all the equipment that they needed to get out in the water. And so we did that. It's been a dream come true. It's really just an amazing space. And if you ever get a chance, swing in, because it's really First Church of Scarborough, and we've got old vintage boards all on the inside of it. So it's just, there's something to see there for everybody. And because of that, I've been able to, I'm a board builder that also owns a retail store. So I get a unique perspective there of, the retail side of things and then the manufacturing side. And it's just a really cool thing to be able to have both of those views towards things. And when it comes to board design, it's like, I could talk about board design all day long because there are so many aspects to it. And I'm glad that they said graphic design, because it's entirely dependent on the user, what sort of wave they're surfing and where they're surfing, who they are. And I guess as soon as I learned of, that you can build these things by yourself and make them however the hell you want, I started looking into it. And I put this picture up here because the guy in the middle is a legendary Hawaiian surfer, Duke Kahanamoku, and he is responsible for spreading surfing all over the world. And this photo was from when he went to Australia and showed a bunch of Australians how to surf, I'm pretty sure. And the reason I put it in here is like what started the whole aesthetic and the basis of surfboard design was back in the early 50s or earlier when they first started building surfboards. And it was very much like your classic cars or other things like that were just like very hand done, beautifully put together. I mean, you look at those surfboards in the back and like everything is pin lined by hand and just like unbelievable craftsmanship. And so that is kind of where the graphic design of things started in the world of surfing. And so in the 60s, things accelerated a little bit more and, got a little bit rougher. The 70s, things started to get a little more radical. And the crazy thing is that during the same time, surfboards went from being that design of like a long board with straighter lines. The boards got shorter and more stout, and the surfing became way more radical. And so the aesthetic of the board changed with that. And so you started to get your like hot rod looking with like flames and like bright colors. And by the time that it was like late 70s, early 80s, it was like neon everything with friggin' flames and like people. It was just a crazy scene. I wasn't a part of it, but I've been told stories and I've researched it a ton, and it was amazing. And so, like a lot of things, I mean, the one that I keep going back to is like classic cars. It's pretty similar there, where like it's kind of a status thing where if you have your Ferrari and somebody sees your, vintage Ferrari on the street, they're probably going to stop and talk to you about it. Where if you have your Toyota Camry that has scratches in it, they're probably going to walk right by it without looking. And like the thing that really separates the things in modern day is like, if you have that higher end board that has a polished finish and crazy artwork, people are going to think that you're probably a little more experienced and that you're probably better at surfing than you might be. And the funny thing there is it could translate to catching more waves. That like if somebody paddles out on this spaceship looking thing, you're probably going to think twice before you drop in on them, and that's when you like pulling out in front of somebody while you're driving. And so that is one thing that, like, growing into surfing, when I first got into it, I thought that people just had these shiny, nice surfboards because it was a cool guy thing, that if you had the nice board under your arm and you're walking around with this really nice surfboard, you're gonna be the cool guy. And it's flashy, expensive, it's one of those status items. And then the more that I've been in it, the more there are definitely a lot of people out there. And I tell a lot of people when they come to us to get a custom board that, like, it matters that you are confident and comfortable in the board that you're on. And so whatever you need that to look like for it to represent you well is what you should have. And it's something that, like, I think more and more people are getting there. I guess this is a board we made years ago, pretty classic color with a simple pin line on it. It just has a very vintage, cool look, and the guy felt pretty good standing on that thing. And it feels pretty good when you have the right equipment under your arm or under your feet. And it's kind of like anything where if you're confident in your equipment, you're not going to have to think about it as much while you're doing it. And surfing's tough, so like you kind of need everything working in your advantage. And I guess to get to let me look around trends. So I did want to hit on trends. It's always changing. California and Australia are typically like 2 to 3 years ahead of Maine and like the Northeast. It's like we see something happen there in design or whatever. The reason I put this slide up, carbon fiber was a big thing in like the early 2000s until now. I mean, especially the last decade or so, most boards that experienced surfers had either got those carbon patches on the tail or carbon around it, and it was just kind of like your cool guy thing. It was an effective, it does make the board strong and stiffer, but it also looks cool. And so that was one thing that we were doing and we saw a lot of, and that was a trend that came and is still kind of here, but not as much as it was in like the early 2000s and up until like 10 years ago. Branding, these are a bunch of logos we have, and it's one thing that, like Pam said, you kind of define who you are and what you represent through a symbol. And we have a ton of logos. The main one with the state of Maine, that's like our classic one, but it's something that I kind of relate it to like music, where different types of music attract different groups of people and different attitudes, and they kind of emulate that. And so we've kind of made a point of like trying to appeal to everybody, where we make really high-end nice boards like the vintage boards, and then we also make your radical short boards that would be kind of like your punk rock, and we try to make everything in between. And that's because here in Maine, it is a melting pot. Like if you wanted to generalize your surf population here, I would commend you if you could actually do that, because it is such a we have doctors and lawyers, and then there's your skate punks, and it's like anyone and everyone that goes out in the water. And when they're out there, everybody for the most part is on a white surfboard with a black wetsuit. And that's one thing that I think I wanted to mention, that because that's the case all over the world. Everybody's on a whiteboard with a black wetsuit, and there's like very little that distinguishes between each surfer out there. And just by putting some color on the board like this one, it makes it unique. It makes it stand out. You can say, I'm the guy with the friggin' orange stripe that turns to yellow on the bottom, or like these are different painted boards that I've done where like you essentially just make it unique to you. And I think if surfers could embrace that and their differences and use their board or a piece of their equipment more for self-expression, it would just it just makes it a lot better. It's just a cooler way of doing things. And I think in Maine it's a little better than other places. There's certain places where you don't paddle out with anything but a white board, or you're not going to catch a wave. They know you're not from there, and it's just kind of a funny thing. But I guess for us as business owners, reaching new audiences and new clients, we've been able to do that by just embracing, the differences that people bring to us. Like that the pine tree stencil there's one, or like a crazy camouflage bottom, or this one here's like a swirl of color that's in the resin, and so somebody can customize by what they're drawn towards. These are fabric inlays, so cut a piece of fabric and paint it and put it on there, and she gets exactly what her dream was. This guy wanted the Janis Joplin cover, so I painted that thing on his board, and you'll never see another one of those. It's just a really cool way of making something unique and custom for each person. This one here, she dried and pressed all the flowers, and we stuck those on her board and glassed over them, and I'd be willing to bet it looks almost, a little more yellow, but pretty much same thing today. Think that's about all that I had that I really wanted to get to. Biggie being that surfboard design, and I guess the whole culture of art and graphics, I wish that it was more mainstream than it is, because I feel like most people would embrace it with open arms, but for whatever reason, people are shy from just doing that. And like as a board builder, I'm hesitant to make, at least, granted, most of our boards are custom, so we build them for each customer exactly what they want. Where if I was to build stock boards for the shop, it is kind of a limiting thing. Like when I was in California, huge 80% of the boards that we would build for stock boards would just be clear laminations, so it's a white board, because if it's colored, if you don't have every color under the rainbow, you're potentially limiting your customer base. And that is a big noticeable thing, that like a lot of people are particular about which color they want. And if it is white, then they don't have to, that's what it is. And that was one thing. I guess I'll open it up to Q&A if you guys have any questions for us or want us to embellish on anything.
Definitely. I've got some questions. That was great. I hadn't actually ever thought about the what you showed, those examples of like the older boards with the pinstriping, and how that's sort of like a more, I don't know, classic style to it. And as things got smaller, the graphic style got more aggressive, which is pretty interesting. I never made that connection, but I don't know. I mean, like, I guess kind of a general question, this would be to you and Pam. It's like, I think surfing as just sort of the way that people see it who may not understand the sport or maybe interested in getting into the sport, there's kind of like this, it carries kind of like this Spicoli stereotype, surfer bro thing. And I sometimes wonder, like, how can you just mentioned you have, doctors and lawyers out there and all kinds of people who are trying to get on the water. So like, how do you, beyond offering different sorts of logos and like different designs, how else do you use design to like to reach out to new audiences in surfing and kind of like make it a more accessible thing?
Pam, you want to take that? Or you want me to?
Oh, I'm muted. I'm sorry. I think at least for what we're doing is to reach out to new communities or to new populations. I think graphic design is kind of taking it back to its basics. What we've seen a lot is it needs to be, you know, straight to the point, and at least for us with the information we want to do, and the photos that we use are really helpful for us because the way we put ourselves out there, and like it's just literally as raw as we are, which is like just like a group of people that's just having fun, you know, and like, yeah, we're like really kooky sometimes, but we're also just like, you know, like we want to have a good time in the water, and like that's what we put out there. And by going to the basics is also just like step out of Instagram, and there's communities out there that probably are not on Instagram, and probably going to the marketplace and go back into printing flyers and do the whole poster and like gluing it, you know, like that's like kind of like what we're trying to do as well, to like really reach out those like that demographic that usually wouldn't be in the water. Because like Ryan said, like, yeah, we have a diverse group of people in the water when it comes to professionals and you know, but in general, like other people who is out there that probably don't even know surfing in Maine is a thing, and not because they're not interested in it, or like it's probably they have never had the exposure, or just as simple as it is, they're struggling in other aspects of their life that have much more weight. So maybe tackle that by like getting those graphics into the little grocery store that they go to, you know. It's just as simple, and going back to the basics of that poster street art kind of thing. Yeah.
I'm gonna ask one more and then I'll let other people jump in, but I'm curious, like you showed that infographic, which I thought was really interesting. And there's an etiquette poster that's like at Higgins, and I think you guys might have one at the shop. And it's something that's like commonly, I guess, misunderstood with people who are new to the sport, like, but to be able to understand those things better would be really helpful and probably make the overall experience of being out there just so much better. So I wondered like how you think you could use graphic design to make that more accessible, make the idea of like approaching the water, what's the etiquette in the water, those sorts of things. Like what sort of ideas could you imagine there?
Yeah, I mean, we have, like, I guess when we first opened the surf shop, I was very adamant that we treat everyone, no matter what they are, that like you treat them with respect. It doesn't matter who they are or what they look like or where they're coming from, that there's somebody who just is interested in surfing. And that's one thing. When I was a kid, going into like skate shops or others, well, granted, we didn't really have many surf shops, but you just get that like vibe of like you're not cool enough. And so from the beginning, we've made a point to not do that. And we spent the last 10 years finding different graphics to achieve exactly what you were just talking about. And Surf Rider Foundation out of California, for the most part, some out of Florida, they have been doing this for a long time. And so we borrowed their graphics and used their graphics and had those signs made. There's etiquette signs that Pam was hinting on earlier that we put up a few years ago, and it's something like that. There's a few in California and on the West Coast that are like very well done. And if you just take the time to go over and look at it and take a minute to read it, you will understand the basics of I mean, essentially it's like rules of the road. And you can learn it in a few minutes of looking at one of those signs. And I think that is a pretty effective way of doing it. It's just a matter of putting it in the right place and letting people know that it's there. And like, because there's so many different access points for the ocean, it's kind of a tough thing to achieve. I mean, you kind of need to do it in a lot of different places.
I think like another thing that, or at least we've talked about in the group and More Women Surf, is let's start doing like little scenes, you know, where like you can have the surf etiquette and leave them at the surf shops and leave them at, so that people can just take one with them and be like, there's no excuse, like you still have it here. You know, obviously add it to our websites and as much as we can, like it's just like a constant of like reminding. But there's also this, I feel like there's this barrier, and I'm gonna talk for myself, because when I first start surfing, like I don't know the lingo or like all the words that surfers use, you know, so I didn't know what snaking was. You know, and as a non-native speaker of like English language, I also like had a hard time like dropping in, and I was like, I don't know, like this is too much for me. But I think like the graphics help. I think also just using like simple words could help even more, especially for those who really are really new to the surf culture in general, because there's people that might have been familiar to surfing through movies and kind of understand certain concepts, but I think it's the words we use, the location, like Ryan and I were talking about that sign, how much we spread out, and like how many media are we going to be using for that, because in the end graphic design can be printed, can be in video, can be just on a screen, like yeah, so it's just literally putting it in everyone's face all the time and be like, you need to read this is your Bible as a surfer. Like carry it with you, you know. Yeah, so I feel like, yeah, there's no excuse, the signs are there, time to read them. But also if us as groups, especially groups that are getting more people in the water, you know, if we can like provide that information more and like just put it more out there, like that is ideal. Yeah.
Stuart, did you have anything else you wanted to ask?
I've got a bunch of questions, but I don't want to take over. And I know we're running a little bit. I know
No,
we're running a little late, you know, so.
it's okay. How about we do one more question and then we'll wrap it up.
I've got a quick
Oh.
question, if I may.
Great, yeah.
Oh, sorry, Mike. Sorry, I'm like checking out a store and asking a question, and everyone's wondering who I'm asking the question of. I'm curious. There's something really successful I found about the More Women Surf logo, being that they just kind of go with the one. Anytime I roll up to a spot and there's a car with that sticker on it, I just have this immediate feeling that like there are nice people in the water, there are allies out there. They're like willing to be patient too. Like I've learned to surf in Michigan, so crowds really aren't a thing. So like I've been surfing for a little while, but etiquette I'm still like probably trying to figure out. And I know if I go out there, then suddenly there's this little bit more calm in me, I guess, as I'm trying to pedal out. Because if I mess up, I'm like, oh, these people are nice. That's awesome. So I was wondering if you guys have had any like intentional ideas on either the surf shop or Pam with More Women Surf on how you can kind of exploit's not the right word, but how you can maybe like build on that. Like if I were to just take a low hanging fruit idea, like if there's a Black Point jersey out in the water, or like, you know, something of that effect, you're like, oh, there's someone who like I can lean on a little bit out there. But how do you kind of take it from the shop or from like the website and bring that kind of spirit of the brand into the water with you that people can recognize, I guess, is a roundabout way to ask the question.
You want to go first, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I used to live at Higgins every winter for many years. And so working at the surf shop and being at Higgins almost every day, I had to be a face for my shop. And I realized what that meant was just being a happy, welcoming, considerate individual and giving everyone the benefit of the doubt. And then the biggie being, this is probably one of the, I feel like a broken record. It's the first time I've said this to you guys, but I say this very regularly to all of my friends and people I surf with, is like, the key thing here that I think is like, the experienced surfers out there are the intimidating ones, and they're typically the ones that get pissed off when someone does something they're not supposed to do. And usually they do one of two things. They either don't say anything and flare up their nostrils and paddle away really quickly, or they freak out. And neither of those things do any good. And so what we try to, like, it's been a decade now of like, my brother, a bunch of our friends, and folks like Pam, you gotta get those people, when they see something or they see somebody doing something they shouldn't be doing, or somebody does, you stop, calmly say, do you recognize what just happened? How can we stop this from, and inform them calmly and effectively in a reasonable amount of time on what's going on, and just approach it as a positive learning experience. And I've been trying to do it for years. A lot of people can't do it, and a lot of times if it's really good conditions, the good surfers are just too stoked and they can't deal with stopping and talking to somebody. But that's really, especially, it seems to be, other than what Pam was saying of educating the person who's just getting into it, that seems to be the only other way of getting through to people on a, like, a regular or in the right place.
Yeah, I also think like it helps a lot. Like it gets harsh, like you said, right? And when it's good, you just want to be surfing. So of course it's like hard to like stop by and be like, let me explain you right now what you need to do. It's more, I think like the reaction that you see was like, yeah, like just watch out, or like, like be friendly. Also, while getting in the water, I feel like what experienced surfers can do, especially if it's not like a amazing day and there's waves, it's just like, if they notice there's someone that's like trying and they're learning, is go for it. Get this one, bro. You got this one. Go for it. Like just give like a little bit more of incentive. And I've experienced that one of those days I was just like surfing for the first time and Crystal was there. And I remember I was just like, don't know what I am doing. I was just like paddling from one side to the other. And I just heard Crystal be like, get forward on your board and just go for it. And it was just, like, it's just that kind of little spirit of like, okay, this experienced surfer who like, it's pretty rad surfer, it's like giving me this chance and giving me a little bit of like a hint of like, you got it, just go a little bit more forward or go a little bit back. It's just like those days that it's not crazy busy, like for those experienced surfers to be like more friendly and be like, yo, you got this one. I could get it, but you go get it, like have one for yourself. Like I think that's important. Also just, I think one of the things we do a lot is we scream a lot in the water to just like represent that, like, and it just comes naturally, you're paddling with friends, even with beginners, and if they get a wave and you see them standing, you're like, just like, yeah, they're just like, just screaming and then sharing that joy. And I think that's like, you can identify when a group like that is out there, like they're like just cheering or laughing, and it's just like, okay, like I'm kind of safe here. I think it's also a lot of, as a beginner, knowing where your capacities are at as well, like if you don't feel that comfortable quite yet with some waves, then try to just make space and first try to like really catch waves. And we have this unspoken rule, right, at Higgins, or not unwritten rule, which is the left side of the rock. That's where you go to practice. Go there to practice, there's still good waves and there's plenty of space for you to just like try new things, get more comfortable, and you slowly start moving to the right side. I think it's just being mindful in both ends, you know, and just like
Oh.
reiterate that.
I was just going to say, it sounds like maybe there's opportunities for a public awareness campaign or something with this, and maybe with a design component, because you know, I don't come from surfing culture. Stuart is the surfer in the group, but you know, I'm a cyclist, and there's definitely all kinds of rules that people know or don't know about that too, so I can totally relate to that. And you know, I think, you know, Guy raising that question sort of says maybe there's a need out there for some kind of you know, I don't know if it's like posters or something that's done through social media or something, to sort of educate people a little bit more about that kind of stuff. I think and there's definitely design opportunities there too.
Yeah, I also think like just a resources, you know, like this is something we are redesigning our website right now, and one of the sections that we are working on is mostly resources, which is where to find tutorials, our own tutorials, the surf etiquette PDF, just as it is, download it, you can print it. But I think like that section is something that should be probably in every surfing, either shop, either school, you know, just like, here are the resources, let's, you know, like if we are seeing a problem and we're trying to fix it, it's not just about let that group do it, it's like we all together, let's tackle it. So
Right.
I
Well,
think that's,
But it's, you know, it's also, Pam, it's not just educating the novices, it's educating the experts. You know what I mean? Like, how do you get those people to understand how to interact with the newbies? That sounds like something to do too.
it's a toughie. I mean, luckily, people who travel get it, because places like California, Florida, Central America, Australia is a biggie. Hawaii probably being the biggest, where like if you go to Waikiki Beach, that is the place to learn how to surf. And so they have it down, and they've been doing it since the 50s. And so really it's kind of, and that's what we tried to do, and we're still doing with the etiquette signs and the handouts at the shop, is pretty much just trying, you know, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. The material's already out there. It is pretty clear. It's, you know, effective. It just is a matter of putting it in the right place, in front of the right people, at the right time. And I don't know how to really do that. I mean, another thing I did want to just mention real quick was like, I still run into kids in schools and stuff very regularly who live right near the coast and didn't even know that they could surf here. And it just kind of blows my mind because of how mainstream it's become. So I mean, that is another part of it, is maybe in that you know, educate the people a little bit.
Yeah, there's definitely opportunities for that too. So we're getting close to the end of what we have left in this session, and we've gone a little long anyway. It's been a great discussion, and thanks for everyone who has stuck with us through all of our trials and tribulations this evening, including our two great speakers. So I think this might be a good place to wrap for the evening. I know I'm going to have dinner in a couple of minutes, so.
Thanks, you guys.
And yes, thanks very much to both of our speakers, Pam and Ryan, and thanks Stuart for leading the discussion, and thanks to all of our attendees, and keep an eye out for our next meeting. There's also going to be a recording of this that will be available, so keep an eye on your email for that in the coming days. Okay.
sounds good.
Thanks a lot,
Thank
everybody.
you very much, guys.
Yeah, thanks guys.
So much.
Bye.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Have a great night.
Thanks again.